Family disputes can make us feel isolated and vulnerable. Maybe you're going through a divorce or a legal dispute about your kids. Perhaps you've spent hours on Google or have even posted anonymously on Facebook to see what others have to say. But are you getting the actual information and support that you're looking for? Our podcast, Legal Lounge, aims to dispel misinformation and downright bad legal information to empower anyone with questions about their family, their children, their finances, their marriage, and the law. As a team focused exclusively on family law matters, we aim to help listeners not only with the information they need, but also with the hope that their situation has a solution. Short disclaimer, please note this podcast is for educational purposes only, and the information should not be relied upon as legal advice or for legal purposes. Hi, Ashlyn. Welcome to the Legal Lounge. We're so excited to have you here today. Starting off, tell us more about who you are and what you do.
Awesome. Yes, I am Ashlyn Gift, and I work for American Security Mortgage, and we do residential mortgages up and down the East Coast. So we do not handle commercial, but we're all about that residential realm, and I've been doing that for about 7 years now, and with the same company, and I love it.
So you do mortgages, you do refinances.
Correct.
And is this for whether it be a first-time home buyer or anyone across the
Yes,
realm?
anyone and everyone. We do not discriminate. So we also can do anything from your government programs, down payment assistance, all the way to your jumbo loans, all underwritten in-house, super neat process. And but yeah, we handle everything, like I said, except commercial and land loans, but everything else is good to go.
So when you say underwriting, that word, maybe it's from my trauma with student loans from law school. But what is like the underwriting process for mortgages, and how does that work?
Yeah, so we do something kind of unique. We actually underwrite your file up front upon pre-approval. And that's just to make sure that the client, when they go to start making these offers and putting down this due diligence money, they feel totally confident that their loan's going to get to the closing table. So for refinances, it would be a little bit different, obviously. But yeah, so we like to handle all that scariness with the underwriting up front and make everybody feel super comfortable.
And I would say, at least from my perspective as a family law attorney, when dealing with individuals going through separation and divorce, and maybe parties are having to refinance a house, or either parties having to purchase a new house, but with a totally different financial backing.
Yes.
That's really important, because people starting that next chapter need to know, okay, how much can I afford?
Right.
And then what is that financial obligation going to look like moving forward?
Right. Yes. Oh, absolutely. And it is so important in these situations to have a legal counsel like yourself on their side, because honestly, communication in our society in general is tough, right? I mean, then when you get put in a situation like this, when it comes to separation and divorce, it gets even harder. And so we really find that a lot of times having that legal counsel up front upon the separation is so, so important to make the mortgage process, refinance process go as smooth as possible.
And what are some things from your perspective that you consider or want individuals to consider when they are going through a separation or divorce and are looking to purchase again or even refinance?
Yes, probably the most important thing is to have that separation agreement or the property settlement agreement in place. A lot of times the spouse, either spouse maybe doesn't want to sign something or is a little reluctant to, cooperate. And so having those, one or those two legal documents signed by all parties, number one, is required. Number two, if you could just get that knocked out as soon as possible, decide who's taking over the marital home and all the expenses. What are you, or if you are going to sell, how are you splitting, the proceeds from that? If you are just separated, you might need a free trader agreement on a new purchase to make sure that the spouse doesn't have any rights to the new purchase. And so there's a lot that goes into it, but getting all those documents and everything kind of organized and signed by all parties and put together, initially just makes, again, the mortgage process go way better for everybody.
And speaking of legal documents, like they have to be not only written up, signed by both parties, but also well written, so you as the mortgage broker know what steps to take.
Correct. Yes, because a lot of times it's not just about the marital property or the new purchase. It's a lot about, is there any child support? Is there any alimony? What's happening with the bank statements? If both spouses are on the bank statement and one of them is going to buy a new home, we need to know, how are they splitting those assets? Because you have access to it right now, but during the separation, you might not have access to those funds, So we kind of have to get all those pieces of the puzzle, put in order to proceed with a new mortgage for either party.
Yeah. And so that brings us to, okay, if the parties can reach a partial agreement or more hopeful, a full agreement on the property division. That's always the hope. Then it makes your job just a lot easier, and it makes it easier for the spouse or ex-spouse purchasing a new property. Yes. But on the flip side, from my perspective, I am a family law litigation attorney.
Right.
Although I prefer to stay outside the courtroom because families tend to do a lot of mudslinging in a courtroom.
Right.
If the parties cannot agree, which does happen relatively often in my world, then we have to litigate it. And unfortunately, if you file a complaint today, you're not going to trial tomorrow.
Correct.
Right? So
a lot of time.
Lots of time. So to your point, if you can at least get an agreement about a free trader or at least what happens to the marital residence proceeds,
the child support, alimony, those few things.
At least some parts of it.
Yes.
Even if it's temporary, like temporary child support or post-separation support, then you can be better suited as their mortgage lender to help them with that next chapter.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And honestly, a lot of times people come to us and they're like maybe newly separated, let's say a couple months, but they're ready to kind of move on, out of that marital home. But there's not a separation agreement in place yet. And a lot of people freak out about that, right? So recently we have seen more of these property settlement agreements that can just kind of outline the few things that we need to know about marital home, child support, alimony, any assets that are getting split up. And when they can just at least give us those few things, because those matter to the underwriting process in a mortgage. So if they can even at least just get us that signed is great. But it's more of a temporary thing, right? There's still going to have to be a separation agreement or a divorce decree at some point.
Yeah.
But some of these other legal documents can kind of be a placeholder until more of that stuff is settled and agreed upon and signed off on.
Yeah, and signed off on. There's no conversation more romantic than discussing a prenup with your partner, right? Okay, maybe the song for your first dance does a bit more in the romance department. Speaking of emotions, though, the prenup is a very legal document that everyone has a very emotional reaction to. Many people avoid the prenup conversation because they feel it is an indication that the marriage will fail. But here's the truth. Half of all marriages already fail, regardless of whether the spouses had the prenup conversation or not. If you or someone you care about is getting married, would knowing what marriage involves legally be important? What about having the difficult conversations surrounding finances, career aspirations, and pursuing parenthood prior to the wedding date? If you are looking to build a solid foundation for your marriage, or you want the same for someone you care about, we are here to help you learn more about prenups from a position of knowledge, not emotion. To learn more about family law from a legal professional, book a consultation with a member of the Modern Legal team by visiting our website, emailing us, or calling us at 704-286-6302. Check out the information about Modern Legal services at modernlegalnc.com. To bring up some of the legal perspective here is, once you've separated, in North Carolina, we call that the date of separation. That is a very important date for valuation of assets,
Right.
figuring out the balances on debts,
Mm-hmm.
figuring out, okay, when does child support start? When does spousal support start?
Right.
And so we encourage people, if they can, to try to resolve some of these issues, find agreements, if not in everything, at least some things before you even
Right.
separate,
Right.
so that you're not rushing to get something signed because you've
Mhm.
already found your new house you want to live in.
Right. Right. And honestly, don't start looking for the
I
next
agree.
step, right? Until some of these things are situated. Because it might be one of those things where you think you're getting the child support or alimony, or maybe you think you're not paying that. And then all of a sudden you are. And then that home that you love and that you're in now isn't as affordable because you're now having to pay out of pocket for other things that you didn't expect to, or, you know, so it's a lot to process. And a lot of the time the clients are so stressed out and, going through a lot of emotions. And so again, I cannot stress enough how important having legal counsel and guidance can be in these times, because there's a lot of emotions going around, and the last thing you want to do is make a bad decision or agree to something with an ex-spouse that maybe isn't what's best for you, the children, or assets, whatever it may be that are getting divided and split up. So, and a couple other points bringing up the child support and alimony.
Yeah.
A lot of times people either don't realize or don't think about the fact that those two payments can be used as qualifying income.
Yes, I was going to ask about that.
Yes.
Like, because even if both parties earn an income,
Right.
you obviously will likely qualify for a better mortgage if you have a higher income.
Yes.
Right?
Or a home, maybe more desirable home or price point. Yeah, absolutely. And so you can use those. There is a little caveat though to this.
You say little, legally I say, ooh, this is huge.
That is the timely payments and the length of time that we have to show that the spouse has been receiving these payments. So the 2 points there. Number one, the length. Let's hit that first. For conventional mortgages, it just has to be 6 months. FHA, like government loan route, you can get away with 3 months. But the big word, timely payments. All right. So, if that payment is due to the spouse on the first of every month, we need to see it deposited on the first of every month for that, length of time, 6 or 3 months, depending on the loan program. If it's late or if it's partial, not going to work, right? Okay. So that is huge to remember when using those to qualify. We've got to see some history of receiving it.
Regularity and on time.
Yes.
Because if it's always late, or to your point, partial does not make mortgage companies happy.
No, partial does not. Nor does late. Anything late, not good for us. So yeah, those two are just things to remember, but keeping in mind that we can use those to help qualify, because a lot of people maybe weren't working in their marriage. You get separated and you're like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Hey, good news. We can use this to help,
Yeah. Make sure I got this right. Is that for conventional, you need 6 months history. For FHA, 3 months. And then maybe there's some caveats, because there's always an it depends.
Yes.
So is that for child support and spousal support?
Correct.
And then for either of those, is there a certain term that needs to be included in the order or agreement? Great
question. Yes, a 3-year continuance.
Okay.
So if you're getting child support and your child is 17, and maybe that stops when they turn 18, then we can't use that because there's not a 3-year continuance there. Same thing with alimony. But a lot of times those things are outlined in the separation agreement or the divorce decree. So that's something easy that we could look at and determine.
Sure.
But yes, great question.
Yeah. And that gets tricky because not everyone is necessarily going to get that order or agreement that says 3 years or says a certain duration of time. And that's all a factor.
Yeah.
So so the language has to be specific and well-written, a well-written order or agreement.
Yes. And a lot of times we have these clients come from newly separated, situations. Yeah. So this stuff isn't in place yet.
Yeah.
So again, great time to reach out to the mortgage professional, ask the questions, get the timeline set, know what verbiage needs to be in these documents, in order for us to use certain things like that for qualifying income or whatnot. But yeah, it's always like there's no dumb questions, right?
Yeah.
So I always tell people just ask. Like you really need to figure it out and make sure because it's for your future, right?
Yeah.
You moving into a new home, a new place, starting a new life, and the last thing you want is to not be able to do that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or let's say you've already moved out and you're like, oh, I have, I don't know, $20,000 saved in a savings account. I'm going to use that as a down payment.
Right.
And you're like, okay, overall that sounds good, but have you talked to an attorney?
Yeah.
Why? Because maybe the other spouse is entitled to half of that $20,000.
Yes.
So it's not actually all your money.
Right.
Or
and people jump to a lot of conclusions.
They jump to a lot of conclusions.
Again, when emotions are running high, we're not thinking clearly in a lot of situations. So,
and go one step further from a legal perspective, if you don't have that agreement and you don't have that free trader, and one of the spouses does buy real property after the date of separation, before the date of divorce, then from a legal perspective, you've just created a possible another marital asset subject to distribution.
You definitely have. Oh, yeah.
And people were like, we're separated. I used my own money. I'm like, but did you? Because we have to trace it and we have to prove it. And because we don't have that free trader or property settlement or separation agreement, there's no way to know for sure until we go through all the financials at that point.
Right. And guess what? Your ex-spouse now probably has rights in that new property.
Yeah.
So,
Whether you like it or not.
Whether you like it or not. Yes, that is the rule. The rules are rules. And, so it's just educating clients and prospective buyers or, just on all these processes is so important.
Very important.
So important.
And so we talked a bit about purchasing new property, but even selling the formal marital residence, even if one party has moved out, it's very possible, or actually I shouldn't say very possible, it is necessary that both spouses sign off on a sale of that residence.
Oh, yes.
Right.
And that's always interesting, right? Because, again, you might have a little bit of reluctancy from one of the parties. But guess what? You cannot sell without both signatures. In North Carolina, you don't need – both spouses don't even have to be on the mortgage and the deed. Yeah. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. The fact that you're married.
It doesn't matter. It's just the fact that you're married, that you were married, I guess. That way.
Yeah.
So, that is in North Carolina. I don't know about some of the other states. Might be slightly different. But we do see that a lot where it's like, we always call it 1 to buy, 2 to sell. So, they don't have to be on anything. But one good point actually, too, to bring up about the marital home is that a lot of people come and they're like, well, I'm on the mortgage, but I really, we're separated. I want to move out and I want to buy something, but I have that debt and I don't know if I can qualify carrying both. So some great news about that and a good way around it is, again, as a part of a separation agreement or a property settlement agreement, anything like that, as long as the ex who maybe is staying in the marital home agrees or signs off that they are the one responsible for the mortgage and responsible for all expenses related to that home. So that's like HOA dues, property taxes, homeowners insurance, all that. As long as they're responsible for all of that and that's a part of that agreement that are signed by both parties, we can omit that debt for the spouse moving out and wanting to purchase.
When you're doing the debt to
even
income
if you're
ratio.
still on the mortgage, which is so helpful.
Huge.
Yes, because it frees up sometimes thousands of dollars for them to purchase a new home. So that is also another cool little thing to note that I don't think a lot of people realize. Yeah. But again, another surprise is to get yourself off that mortgage at any point in time, you have to refinance. Yeah. So that's why right now we're seeing this come up a lot is because nobody wants to refinance when they have those 2 and 3% interest rates.
And who knows if they'll ever go back to that.
Yeah. Exactly. So this is coming up a lot recently when one of the spouses is trying to move out and purchase something else. How do I get that debt off? I'm on the mortgage, I'm on the deed, and that's one way to do it is a legal document.
Yep.
Signed by both parties stating that the one spouse has sole responsibility.
Yeah. And that's the tricky part, right? Because even if theoretically you want to refinance or the other side wants to refinance, from a financial standpoint, with the realities of the world, right, that you are not in control of, the two of you may agree, okay, you know what, I'm not going to force the refi because I don't want you having a 5, 6, 7% interest rate on a loan, because then at that point, the property may need to be sold.
Right.
But then that means both sides now have to purchase new property or rent.
Right.
And especially if kids are involved, do we want the kids to have to be pulled to a different home, maybe a different school district? And then also all parties suffer the financial consequences of that increased interest rate and new mortgage and all of that.
Exactly. And I think that legal document actually really helps too, because if for some reason, let's say the spouse maybe stops making payments.
Oh, of course.
Something like that, that legal document protects you moving forward, even though your name is on the mortgage and technically you'd be legally responsible.
Yep.
That legal document signed should protect the spouse.
Which I always appreciate, because if someone comes to me with a well-written separation agreement and someone's not paying, I will take them back to court.
Oh, yes.
And I actually do not mind. I prefer parties resolve things because there are so many emotions tied into it. Resolve things amicably on the front end. Who gets what, who stays in the house, how is the time with the children figured out, right? Because that's very personal.
It is.
But once you've agreed to it, I will take you to court any day of the week if you're not following that agreement.
Right. And sometimes, even though, and maybe you can speak more to this, of it not being best to make those decisions right after, but it also maybe is kind of good, because you might be thinking a little more clearly versus 3 months out from the separation. Maybe someone started seeing somebody else or something. There might be some,
Yeah. To that point, I actually call it the cliff. There is a term for it, at least in my office. It's the cliff, because when parties are in that contemplation period of, should I stay in this marriage? Should I leave? Should we separate? Maybe they've even had the nonchalant conversation with their spouse about, maybe this is just not working.
Right.
Should we see a marital counselor, et cetera? There is still that communication highway, right? There is still some of that. I mean, it may be clogged with traffic, but it's still happening. Right. And if we can stay there, if we can stay in the, yes, someone may have done something wrong, or we feel guilty, and they're essentially, both parties are kind of going through a grief process and a realization process. If we can almost stay there and try to resolve things there while we're still communicating, we are more likely to not go off what I call the cliff. And even if it hurts, even if it's emotional, if you're more likely to come to an agreement, especially if you're actually still living together, that then works for both sides, because no one has taken on the additional financial obligation of an apartment payment or, new furniture or whatever else. And if we resolve things then, and we don't go off the cliff, then we can keep you at least, yes, your highways are going to merge separately, right? They're going to go separate ways, but at least we can keep you on the road. But if not, and you get to the point where, okay, now we're separated, I can't pay my rent, I don't have enough money, the kids aren't being provided for, and then someone doesn't put the right lunchbox in the backpack for the 5-year-old. And we go off the cliff.
We're off the cliff.
We're off the cliff. Then we're all just falling. And when I mean falling, I mean everyone is spiraling. Attorneys are trying to keep clients to stay on earth, right? Because they're all in La La Land, right? Well, I want everything. I want $1 million. I'm like, you don't have $500,000 in your marital estate. And everything's spiraling. And then that's when people start coming up with these ideas and demands that are not
realistic,
based in reality,
high in emotion. For both people, right? I mean, like you said, staying on the path of just what's best for everybody involved is so important. And yeah, a lot of people I feel like just probably lose control.
Oh, they do. And what happens is they spiral, right? And they start mudslinging. This is generally when you see lawsuits being filed and I'm going to serve them. Let's serve them by sheriff and blah, blah, blah. But it bottoms out. And I kind of laugh because when it bottoms out, you actually see it. Like I see it in a case where it's like everyone has just hit the ground. Everyone's exhausted. We've been negotiating and litigating for possibly 4 or 5 years, maybe longer. Or for some people, it's like over a year. And they're like, that's our cutoff. And they're like, I just want to be done.
Right.
And it's like,
where's the paper? Let me sign.
Yeah.
I just want to be over it.
And it's like, well, we've been falling the past year, 2 years, 3 years.
This could have been done years ago.
literally could have been done. And it probably was better years ago because we didn't incur attorney's fees. We didn't incur court costs. We haven't been in a courtroom because I'm sure the listeners who listen regularly have already heard me say this. No one leaves a courtroom happy. No. And if you go into a courtroom, especially when there's children involved, and you're mudslinging and you're saying everything bad about the other spouse, and then you walk out and you're expected to go to the soccer game tomorrow night and be smiling, happy parents for your kid.
Right.
It's really hard. I would argue impossible.
Literally. And uncomfortable and
awkward.
Yes, just all the above. Like, no. So I agree with you. I mean, I think really kind of getting some of these big ticket items decided, signed off on as early as possible while the highway's open. I love it. Yeah, it's so important.
Well, in the marital home, and sometimes it's retirement, but I would argue the marital home generally tends to be the biggest ticket item when we're talking about property and debt distribution.
Yes. Ugh.
Yeah. I feel you in that.
It is. But yeah, there's some good ways to kind of divvy it up. Or like I said, if one party does want to move forward, maybe one wants to sell because, selling right now in Charlotte or surrounding areas, great asset, right?
Yeah.
And maybe you don't want to be in that home where there's triggers of the marriage or, but then you have to remember if there's kids involved, keeping them in the school district, keeping them in their rooms where they're comfortable versus uprooting them, I'm sure that's always common conversation between spouses of what's best and what, where do we go from here? But if anyone ever has any questions about kind of what does this look like, if we do sell this, what do we do here? Can I refinance my spouse off? Again, going back to can I purchase if I'm on the mortgage? We're always open. Great time to reach out to a mortgage professional and say, here's the situation. What are my options?
Yeah.
Where do I go? What can I afford to buy? I mean, reality, we might have to say hey, listen, maybe you guys do want to sell the home. Take some, some of the assets or the equity in the home. Yeah. And then get yourselves, pay off some of this debt.
Yeah.
What a great way to start a new chapter, but being smart about it. Maybe even using some of the equity to do stuff in a home, like doing a cash out refi and paying off attorney's fees. Yeah. I mean, sometimes that's the kind of stuff that we have to look at and, just making sure, your payment might go up, but if you don't have XYZ debt, your all-in liabilities could be less per month.
Yeah.
Because we could pay off some of these big ticket items like your car payment maybe, or you ran up credit card debt. Yep. Whatever it may be, yes, your mortgage might increase a couple $100s, but if you think about if we can cash out, pay off all this, that might be your only debt.
Yeah.
And in the grand scheme of things, that could be lower for somebody too. So that's, again, something we can definitely help with.
Yeah.
And during that refi, we remove the spouse, the ex-spouse. I mean, there's killing two birds with one stone kind of thing on a couple of things. So,
and you actually touched on a really good point. I would love listeners who are thinking about separation and divorce or going through it to consider is the emotional toll, not only of the process, but what's tied to the residence. I've had more than one client come to my office and during the initial consultation demand, I am keeping the house.
Right.
And I was like, cool. I don't even know what the house looks like. So I don't know what it costs. I don't know how big it is. Like, okay, it might be great. On the flip side, can you give me a little bit more information?
Yeah.
And especially with mothers I have seen, well, this is the house I raised my kids. And I obviously give due regard to that. And I try to remind my clients, I love the fact that you have those memories. I love the fact that you have children that you adore. Let's remember these children, if they were born of these parties in the marriage, you know, that is a great memory.
Right.
But especially if your children are older or about to move out of the house or already moved out.
Right.
Your memories will still exist beyond the physical structure of the house.
Right.
And so think about that. Think about, yes, you have the memories. Do you have pictures? Let's keep those pictures.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Let's keep all the memories intact as much as we can.
Right.
But it's not necessarily the house that matters to you. It's your memories and your children.
Right.
And on the flip side, didn't you share that house with the person you're about to break up with?
Yes, right.
So yes, you have all these wonderful memories, but don't you have some like
bad
not?
memories? I like to call them triggers, right?
Triggers,
like literally, if like you see that the cabinet is still broken, because you chose to stay in the middle, you're gonna get mad every day. Like, oh, she doesn't fix that,
the
whatever.
Garage was never fixed right? Or that home project was never completed.
Yes, but I also think that this is probably something a lot of people could benefit from hearing is, did you ever ask the kids, depending on the age?
Yeah, that's true.
Hey, I know that mommy and daddy aren't staying together, and we could either, go to a new home or we could stay here. Like, what do you want? Do you want to stay here? Do you like it here? Does it make you sad?
Yeah.
Because maybe one of, us isn't here. I don't know. So maybe sometimes depending on the maturity of the child, maybe has anybody ever thought to maybe ask them what they want versus making the decision for them,
Yeah. And especially if there's been arguments and, the children have overheard them or, if there has been domestic violence, like to your point, maybe the child really doesn't want to stay in their room because it's triggering for them.
Yes. They have bad memories.
And that's maybe that's all they really remember.
Right. So I think sometimes just asking, right?
Yeah.
Like,
have the conversation.
Or bringing it up to a parent or parents, in the room.
Yeah.
What do you think they feel? Like, So
really thinking through not just the financial aspect of keeping a home.
Yes.
But maybe it's more therapeutic for everyone involved to buy that new home.
Yes.
And moving is a big ordeal.
Yeah.
I did one recently. And it's like you can very much denote that next chapter, right? That new chapter where, okay, now we have a fresh slate. I had a client one time. She bought like a new build townhouse here in Charlotte, which I think townhouses are like all the craze now.
Yes. Low maintenance.
And she was one of those from the get-go. She's like, I'm keeping the house. I want the house, yada, yada, yada. She got the townhouse. And I remember talking with her after she initially, I don't even think she had moved in yet. And I could just see the tension that had just released from her shoulders and how much more the kitchen is perfect.
Yeah.
The light into the dining area is wonderful. And I'm like, those new memories and that new experience for her, she wouldn't have experienced had she kept the
new
house.
Space. There's something about starting over, right? So, it's awesome. I think a lot of people just don't think about that feeling or that sense of relief.
Yeah. And she even said that when the kids came home from college, they were so excited because they could have grown up spaces and rooms and
their own space. Decorate it how they want to. It's new. Everybody loves new, right?
Yeah.
Why not spoil yourself if you want to and do that. So, but a lot of things we can help with.
Yeah.
And together, right? Like us working together with the clients is, like I said, the legal part of this is so important.
Yeah.
And some people just don't think about it.
Yeah. So the more we can get ahead of it, the better.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Which this hopefully helps, this conversation.
Well, I appreciate you being here, Ashlyn. Thank you so much for bringing all your knowledge to the table. I think it's invaluable to listeners and people out there with these questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. I can't wait to do it again soon.
Yes, we'll see you soon. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our discussion. To learn more about me and the Modern Legal team, go to our website, modernlegalnc.com, or check out the links in our show notes to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You can also call us at 704-286-6302. If you have been intrigued by the conversation and would like us to continue our discussions, please subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. See you next time.